put a thing in the YouTube say, strong language ahead.
This podcast is rated M for mature.
Or I think Rooster Teeth has a thing on their content where they actually say green, yellow, or red or something for the content.
By the time we're finished recording, we'll know whether or not I've totally lost my shit over something.
And in other news, it's as we're about to finish up, and I just say Mass Effect writer, and she just goes insane.
Oh dear. Alright.
Alright, you want to do the countdown and introduction, or do we want to let Theora do the introduction since she's the guest of honor?
Well, I don't know how to introduce it because I don't actually know what the name of your show is.
Hey, I don't know
what
the hell's going on here. We're just going to hear the
Caleb? I'll do it.
What? No.
Yes.
Sabotage. Go ahead then.
Alright, and someone's right. Caleb, stop! Hands up in the air, young man! Welcome, everybody, to the Artistry and Games podcast. Today we're joined by special guest, Theora Kraft. And,
hello.
And as always, Caleb's soapbox lot is sitting there and making weird faces.
Hello.
Unfortunately, Maxwell got pulled into a time vortex, so he's not going to be available for this week.
He thought he was too good for us.
And for some reason now I am Elijah Crest. Apparently I'm toothpaste.
Well, either that or you've just got a crest on you like a cockatiel.
I like that idea.
Oh,
let's just call him cockatiel. He's a cockatiel then.
So, BlizzCon, that happened. And most notably, at least for me, Overwatch. Blizzard's making a third-person shooter, combat MOBA-ish, team-based-ish, Team Fortress 2-ish game. And
people are excited. This has been their first new IP in how many years?
17.
Unless you count Titan, which died horribly.
Well, that's why. Titan is MIA, RIP, gone forever.
Yeah, it's like a Spartan. It's never dead, but it's missing in action permanently.
I think it's safe to say Titan is dead. Dead. Like old school first-person shooters sometimes. Dead. But yeah, Overwatch. What do you think about it, peoples?
I'm actually excited. I'm usually not a fan of Blizzard stuff. I'm gonna admit
what?
that. I haven't got into. I have Diablo 3 Ultimate Evil Edition. I'm gonna be trying that.
Burn the witch! Burn the witch!
But here's the reason why I'm actually excited for this over some of the things and we'll be later talking about one of them, Evolve, and similar big AAA multiplayer games. They're like, oh, we're going to redefine what multiplayer is. There's a character in this game that they show off fairly early on. Not only does she run around with double pistols and jump around like a pilot from Titanfall, but she can pull a Prince of Persia and reverse time for herself, sending her back. There's a double pistol wielding Reaper who can go into a crazy mode where he's shooting everyone at once and teleport. There's a woman who snipes, and her ultimate ability lets her see through walls so that she can aim up every single shot properly while using a grappling hook like Batman to get anywhere, and poison traps apparently. And there's even crazier ones, there's a Hindu robot who fires orbs at people, and a gorilla that drops the dome shield from Halo and can punch people and also has a long-range arc gun. It's very creative, and all the classes are very distinctly themselves. So it's like a MOBA in the sense that every single character is their distinctly own sort of subset. They all fit into one of 4 general classes, but it's much more flexible than the traditional shooter. And it just feels like they're having fun with it and actually trying to create unique play styles rather than hoping that people create unique play styles by giving them, say, a pick 10 system. I'm not saying the pick 10 system is bad, but in those sort of games, foo strategy will always win.
I gotta say that I can definitely respect the fact that they seem to be trying to make the classes very, very distinct from each other. I've definitely found that too many games, when they get really, really, caught up in balance, they end up essentially dumbing everything down to being exactly alike with mildly different animations. On the other hand, though, I do think this is going to be
particular.
Just a lot of MMOs that I've played, it's like, pick your assault rifle, or your pistols, or your shotgun, and every single one of them is going to fire at the exact same rate, do the exact same amount of damage, in the exact same increments. And it's like, great, this is more an aesthetic choice than an actual gameplay choice. But I can definitely see that it looks like they're trying to make the Overwatch classes much, much more distinct. At the same time, I really want to see how well they manage to balance this out. But it is Blizzard. If anyone has experience with balancing multiplayer games, it's them. At the same time, though, it is looking to be a purely multiplayer game, which is part of the reason why I can't be arsed.
A problem with multiplayer.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't like competitive multiplayer. I can take it in small doses, I can have fun for a couple hours with friends, but after that I just don't care anymore.
The biggest thing that caught my eye was just the sense of speed and mobility over a lot of other of its competitors and peers, so to speak, because obviously one of the big draws people are noticing is, oh, it's Team Fortress 2 done by Blizzard. Well, obviously there's parallels there. However, every character seemed even more fluid. Like, even the big bulky gorilla seemed more fluid than a lot of the characters in Team Fortress 2. And like you said, the one person had a grapple hook, some of them can fly, there's teleporting, there's super speed. Like, it seems to be a bit faster paced in some ways and just more mobile in general. Like, there was even a bit of Mirror's Edge in some cases with like parkour stuff.
That's the sort of thing, though, that I'd really prefer to get my hands on first before actually making a judgment, because people were, throwing a big conniption about how awesome Brink was going to be with all its parkour moves. Does anyone remember how Brink turned out?
And the thing is, though, it wasn't the way that the game played. It was the design and the setup of the missions that made it really boring, because it was repetitive. It was the same thing over and over. It was literally these same things cut and pasted in different maps, and that's what killed it.
Distinct at all.
At the same time, though, a lot of players that tried to give it a fair shake, though, pretty much all complained to me that the parkour was darn near useless, because just the rate of movement and everything came down to, it just made you a bigger target.
And the way the maps weren't designed around it, that's the thing. Like, there weren't a lot of places to use the parkour, or where you did try to use it, it was, oh, well, you can't go here because reasons. And that was the big problem, because they made a big deal about it. So then in the games, well, there's no point using it because you haven't built the maps to use it in any meaningful way. So basically everyone just ran around on the ground shooting each other. And it was really, really boring. And that was a problem with it. At least what we're seeing here, and obviously I haven't gotten hands-on time with it, and I'm not saying that it's, amazing, but at least from what they've shown, it looks like the maps are going to be a bit more varied. From what little we have seen, the maps do look a little more open. But some of the classes don't use the parkour either. Or some of the characters, I should say. So it's not like everyone will be using it. So that'll be good if every character has their own distinct way of movement. Because obviously if you have a gorilla, that big Winston sexy gorilla running around doing parkour, it'd be kind of like, what? I call shenanigans.
At the same time, though, monkeys in the trees,
But he's a gorilla with a bunch of armor, and he looks more like the heavy tank kind of guy. Which I'm not saying
they can climb around like I forget what their names are now. The big vampires in Nazgûl. Those guys just pretty much stab their hands into the building and climb upwards.
But that's not parkour.
But it is useful for traversal.
It is. So it looks interesting. I mean, obviously, they are trying to do something. They're trying to not cash in, but they are trying to catch people's eyes that are interested in MOBAs, the Team Fortress 2 crowd. And something that I've heard a lot of people say is the comparisons to Gearbox's Battleborn. And whereas Battleborn sounds like a straight-up shooter, a MOBA and shooter skin, this looks more like a first-person shooter with MOBA-ish elements.
From what I've summarized, why I'm a lot more interested in this one.
Because I don't like with Battleborn. The whole reason I'm not very interested is because they're just taking the formula and putting in a new skin, and it doesn't sound like there's anything new or interesting, and just the transition, the skin they're putting it in, I don't think fits very well.
Well, there's more to it than just that. There's one thing that I think we talked about a long time ago when we were first talking about Battleborn in a podcast, right when it got announced.
Long time ago.
You look at the game in Battleborn, a lot of the classes and characters just don't seem to mesh. All these different races and everything, it's kind of like, okay, maybe two of these I could see in the same setting, but some of these are like, there's a woodland elf right next to basically Master Chief. And yes, they both look cartoony, but they're not very consistent. Whereas here, most of it actually looks pretty much the same in universe. I mean, some have a more fantasy slant, and some have a more sci-fi slant, but they're all using guns primarily, except for like that one guy who uses a bow and arrow, and the Hindu robot that's using balls. But
he's a henbot.
They're using specific.
That might have more to do with Blizzard being able to create very consistent art styles.
True.
I mean, you can look at a Blizzard game and immediately know who made it.
And another thing is, I don't actually have a problem with the characters not meshing in a way, because that's one of the appeals of League, is you have my favorite character, Renekton, who's basically modeled after Egyptian gods, and he's a gigantic alligator/crocodile. And then on the other hand, you have Vigor, who is a 3 feet tall, dark wizard cat who you never see his face, and he always talks like this. And there's a lot of disparity, and it really shouldn't make sense. But the way they've put it together, it makes sense in its own way, I guess. But it doesn't ever bother me like, oh, there's this guy who shouldn't fit in this universe. It's like a space marine beating up and looks like Anubis. That's not the problem I have with Battleborn. Battleborn just looks dull, honestly. It doesn't look dull, interesting. Yeah. And I mean, I'm still really bitter about Gearbox, so...
Plus, they kind of actually, even from the story standpoint, because they're trying to actually sell Battleborn. You're saying, Theora, that you weren't interested in this one because it doesn't have a campaign. Well, Battleborn's going to, but they kind of wrote themselves into a corner, because we know Gearbox, they like to make franchises when they can. Brothers in Arms, Borderlands, and they were hoping for Aliens Colonial Marines. But
well, they didn't actually make that game. So.
Well, yeah, I know, but we're not going to get derailed by that. But here, it's the last few worlds that are left alive. This is it. This is pretty much the last stand. It's like we skipped Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2 and started right on Mass Effect 3, and that's how we're going to start the franchise.
Well, it's not even necessarily going to be a franchise so much as, it could essentially be their attempt at capturing the LOL audience, who will do the same thing over and over and over. Oh, I'm sorry, did I just unintentionally insult someone?
Well, Christian's not here. He can't be the upset LOL player.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Darn.
Trust me, I have no love for MOBAs. You can say whatever you wish.
But that said, I mean, part of the reason I think Overwatch looks a little bit more interesting is people do keep making MOBA comparisons, but I'm wondering if that's just because of the fact that it's the latest, hottest thing. Objective-based shooters have been around for a very long time.
Indeed.
Uh-huh. Enemy territory, old school battlefields.
The original Team Fortress.
Yep.
And this might just be trying to capture that old magic.
Which I would be all for. That would actually be really awesome.
I mean, I loved playing Invasion in the Halo games. That was one of my favorite modes in Reach.
Just got to try that tonight. Just got to finally try that tonight.
Oh, that was so much fun. Especially because you could swap sides. Oh, you're Covenant. Oh, you're Spartans. And you all had different things. That's what.
Oh, yeah, that was wonderful. And it actually reminded me a lot of Operations mode from Killzone 3, just a little bit more flexible. Because you've got the tug and pull, and you've got the defenders and the attackers. All you need to do is add in cutscenes for in between things, and it would have been exactly the same, but with Halo gameplay.
But yeah, I've always been able to have a lot more tolerance of objective-based PvP games, primarily because a good team can always trounce the twitchiest team. I mean, most shooters, it pretty much boils down to who sees who first and who can pull off headshots fastest. But whereas, if you throw in the objectives, if people are ignoring them to try and up their KD ratio, then they're going to lose.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's always when it's nice to have a game that'll realize, hey, sometimes you're going to have players that just don't want to cooperate, or maybe they just aren't good, and the game doesn't revolve around having everybody. Sure, it's great if you can have everyone on the same page, but if you have one person in your team in a game of LoL, it can pretty much make you lose. Not always, but most of the time you're pretty much guaranteed a loss. That's why a lot of people, they get in and they're like, I'm just going to troll this game, and they will feed and throw the game because that's how important it is. And a game of Dota too, and that's what makes it kind of frustrating because it's so dependent, and you're wasting all this time in a game you know you're going to lose, and you're not getting any fun out of it.
When it comes to LoL, though, I mean, the only thing that tends to drive me crazy about MOBAs is the fact that they have gotten to the point where they're very formulaic. I feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over again and essentially just honing in on it, trying to get, that team that all works together towards this exact same thing each time. And I don't feel like I'm doing anything differently. At least when it comes to something that we're looking at with, like, Overwatch, there's going to be a lot more variance.
Now, the other big news to come out of BlizzCon was more Hearthstone expansions. Do either of you actually play Hearthstone?
Nope, I don't.
Nope. I don't like card games.
Okay. Well, I'm a huge Magic the Gathering fan. So I played Hearthstone a while ago, and I played it for a little bit. But the main problem I have with it is it's very reliant on RNG, random numbers game. And there's a lot of decks that revolve around, and there's a lot of cards that revolve around random damage and stuff. And it's really aggravating because in Magic, there are some things that are random, but for the most part, when you build a deck, it's built around kind of a theme where you can just throw stuff together. Whereas in Hearthstone, there's more of, all right, here's a bunch of cards, and they were all really boring, and there wasn't anything really to it. It's the same old stuff over and over again, and even the mechanics they have weren't that interesting. But, on the other hand, it was really fast-paced, it was really simple to grasp, so I could see the appeal of it, and I did play it for a little while. And now they've come out with it's going to be a new expansion. I think it's actually going to cost money, whereas the other one, it was free for a little bit, and then they made you pay for it later on, but I'm still not very interested in it because I still don't think Hearthstone has the general mechanics that are very interesting, whereas even some of the other basic competitors, the Magic or other card games, have more interesting mechanics.
At the same time, though, I mean, part of the reason a lot of people don't get into Magic is because it is a lot more difficult to grasp.
But the thing is,
and
it's
I
not
believe,
that
and
hard.
Also, as far as paying for Hearthstone goes, as far as I'm aware from friends that play it, you can actually, like, earn in-game currency, I thought?
You can grind. You have to grind like crazy, though. It's ridiculous. It takes a lot.
But
You're
that's
limits. What?
That's not all. I know that grinding normally is not a great thing. I'm not. You know, I hated the fractal grinding of some games, but I used to play Warframe a ton. That game is extremely grindy, but if it's a game like that where you can just still enjoy it, where it's not that all the content's locked off, it's just that to get a lot of the additional stuff you have to grind, that's not always a bad thing. And I've seen lots of people who've played Hearthstone, thousands of matches, they're still going.
I'd say I wouldn't mind grinding, but I just didn't find it that interesting. That's the problem, because they have a very limited selection of cards, and you see the same things over and over again, where you see a card and you automatically know what's going to happen, and you know what's coming. And then if you don't get what you need, like, it's pretty much game over, and there's just not a lot of surprises to it right now. Whereas I can go play Magic at the college, and I'll find people who play cards I've never seen before, and even if they do play something that I've seen before, they may do it in a different way. And I just wasn't enjoying it that much. So I was grinding, but it wasn't enjoyment. It was more of, let me see if I can get some cards that are actually interesting. And after a while, I just gave up.
That said, Magic has been around for a lot longer and had a lot more time to expand on that sort of thing. I could see Hearthstone essentially becoming much more interesting along those lines.
Right, later on. But when I first started Magic, like 3 years ago, I jumped in with a friend of mine. He had just got back into it, so we were limited to one set, which is basically like 3 expansions. So even in that expansion, that one set, there was a lot of stuff. And I don't know. Like you said, maybe if Hearthstone, if it's around for a while, it could get more interesting, more varied. But right now, it's just not. It's not
Intense
very
typing.
interesting to me. Of course, always. And also, Metallica played at BlizzCon, and I'm disappointed because I have yet to see them. Bastards! You laugh. I will see them. I swear it. I swear it.
Anyway,
Well, you mentioned Mass Effect earlier.
Oh,
So why
we're
don't we-
jumping right to this now. Let's ease into this.
What?
Those of you with Xbox Ones probably noticed there's a game really worth getting right now, or rather 4 games. The Halo Master Chief Collection has released. And not only has it released, it's actually led to a surprising amount of discussion, but also a little bit of some odd surprises. For instance, apparently you can now pretty much view the legendary endings without even putting any effort in, because all the ending sequences are now available just for quick access as everything's unlocked, so you can now skip ahead to that. And for some reason this was a controversy for some people.
Because they worked so hard for the legendary endings back in the day that these noobs can get it without it? Ha!
Because
What?
YouTube, that doesn't exist.
Of course not. They
because
existed-
them kids are on my lawn.
Yep.
Some
Yeah.
people are just going to be angry because. But also, since you brought up Master Chief, I've read more than one review, and people seem to have, or at least some of the reviews I've read, seem to be knocking Reach, saying how it's one of the weakest entries in the Halo series, and I'm really surprised because Reach was one of my favorite ones.
And I conveniently just finished it today.
I definitely say that design-wise, I loved the world that they built for Reach. The actual environments that the firefights took place in. It seems like every time I play, I'm finding something new just tucked away somewhere. You know, going back to that one area and finding that one place where it turned out there was a sniper rifle and it changes the entire way that you approach the map. I really enjoyed the essential arena setups that they had for Reach, and it's part of the reason why I ended up hating 4 so much, because they turned 4 into a bloody corridor shooter.
And another thing is, I've read some of the reviews I've read are saying that Halo 4, a lot of people were knocking it, and they're saying, oh, well, it's actually not as bad now.
All I can say for Reach is, story-wise, I will give people it's not nearly as impressive as I expected it to be.
It's a war shooter. You knew the thing is, going in, you knew it was going to happen.
Trust
You know
me,
what's gonna happen.
I also finally started trying to play Gears recently, and you both heard how that went.
I warned you.
I know, but you undersold it. You undersold it.
As I put it to, listeners just tuning in, of course, is that after playing the Gears of War games, I suffered from such terrible testosterone poisoning, I ended up needing an immediate transfusion of rom-coms.
Yeah, I still need to try 3. I tried 1 and 2 both for about 30 minutes, and each one I've taken out about as quickly.
But, I said,
but
going
with
into Reach.
But with Reach, gameplay-wise, I actually really like it. And in fact, I strongly advise, if you're like me and you've been playing on PC and you are so damn tired of waiting for the ports to ever come, because, Spartan Assault doesn't fucking cut it, Microsoft. Yes, I've used the swear jar for one little bit. I'll throw in my coin.
You didn't say it beforehand. Shenanigans.
But Reach I think it was the perfect game for me to start playing Halo on Xbox, because it's the most like Halo Combat Evolved, and actually kind of the least like Halo 2, and I think that's why not as many people like it, because there's a lot of people who love Halo 2, and that's why they're more into the 3 and 4, and I guess to some extent ODST. But if you're like me and you actually kind of favored the first one more, Reach feels a lot more like a direct sequel that you wanted. It fits a lot better gameplay-wise, and as Theo was saying,
Actually, I was going to say, I mean, as much as I have my issues with 4, I really felt like the actual gunplay between Combat Evolved and 4 was probably closest, because the number one thing that everyone complained about with Reach was bloom. It was always about the bloom. And
Yeah.
I do notice that when I switched over and started doing 4 multiplayer, my KD spread got much, much better. It's a much easier game to play. There's fewer things that you need to compensate for within the mechanics.
True.
That said, I still very much enjoyed Reach.
Oh yeah. Especially that ending.
oh, the
Into
ending
the
was
campaign.
fantastic. I want to write a feature on that.
Because it's so powerful and it's just so simple.
Yeah, it's one of the best uses of mechanics to convey narrative I've ever seen. The simple fact of the matter of, you're going to die, but you're going to try to survive as long as you can. And I'm actually happy to say I managed to make it 6 minutes. I did not even expect that, but
Good on you.
thank you. I was
Do you want a cookie?
I think I made it about 10, but then it was because I found a mounted turret, if I remember right.
yeah, I was using the mounted turret. That first got me through, then I ripped it off. I took out a few of the elites and everything. Then I was running around for a bit. And I also like how just like the HUD takes damage over time as you're actually losing health and everything.
Yep.
But there's still items around the map that you can find, and while you can't see all your items, you can still use everything. So I can still use my abilities, I can still use my grenades. I'm just flying blind, and that worked so well. And I just kind of wish some of the earlier narrative moments and a few of the character moments worked better, because I just kept thinking, like, wait, why does George have to die? There are like 3 other Marines up here. They could do the bomb, he could jump down with me. It was one like that caused dissonance, so I wouldn't say it's my least favorite Halo game or my most favorite one. It's good. And everyone pretty much just going on knocking it, I don't know what to tell you, other than it's apparently the popular one to hate. And that used to be ODST, from what I understand. That one used to be the popular one to hate, unless you loved Firefight.
I think people still hate Reach more than ODST, though, because ODST gave them Firefight.
Yeah.
And they could just skip the campaign.
I do think that Reach probably fell victim to one mistake that I think the Halo series made, is that they kind of became beholden to the Master Chief. I mean, just an example. Look at how long the Resident Evil franchise has been going, and for all its cheesiness and all its, forgetting about horror sometimes in favor of giant set piece moments.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
One of the
things that they did do right, though, is they never got beholden to just one character. People still keep coming back, and it doesn't matter to them who's starring. People have their favorites, but they still want to know what the hell's going to happen, whether or not you're playing Chris or Leon or Jill or whoever.
That's true. Yeah. And see something interesting like Silent Hill. Each one has their own protagonist. It follows someone different every time.
Exactly.
I think the Fatal Frames did that too. I couldn't say for sure.
Yeah, I think Fatal Frames had multiple protagonists now. There are a few mothers and daughters in sequence, but other than that, it's been pretty broken up.
I mean, you can still bring characters back, and people love it when you do, but by not becoming nailed down to one character, you open up so much more potential. There are so many incredibly interesting characters within the Halo universe, but people have gotten so locked down on Master Chief that they are not very responsive to any of the other characters. I mean, Arbiter's kind of awesome.
Yeah, I love Arbiter.
That's why 2 got a lot of shit, because they were like, oh, you can play as Arbiter? It was like, Arbiter's awesome. Arbiter's actually really good. He's interesting.
I loved the stealth ability. Yeah,
And I actually think, in some ways, he's more interesting than Master Chief, because Master Chief is a blank slate, whereas Arbiter's kind of going against his religion in some ways, all this stuff he's been indoctrinated his whole life, and now he's going against it. That's a very awesome conflict.
The core thing that makes him better is the fact that he has conviction. Everything the Arbiter does, he does with a purpose, whereas everything Chief does, he just does. That's why I
can kill aliens with my
you're saying that a lot of people focus on the Master Chief, and I agree that a lot of people do, but the reason I ever would come back usually was either if it was a spin-off like ODST or Reach where there was a new protagonist, or Cortana. That was actually my main interest. As far as I was concerned, she was the main character I actually found the most interesting. Master Chief was just me shooting things while she did the technical heavy lifting.
Oh yeah, Cortana was fantastic. I mean, the only trick, like you said, with the Master Chief being such a blank slate character and then eventually trying to fill things out more, to give people more to latch onto, I give them respect for what they were trying to do with Halo 4, but the execution came across as a bunch of like an awkward high school play.
Well, here's the thing. There's one aspect I think that they could have. I hate that they killed off in the comics. And yes, if you haven't been paying attention to the comics that happened right after Halo 4, some spoilers here. So the Didact actually doesn't technically die at the end of Halo 4. He apparently dies in the comics, but I loved the Didact because it's like, okay, he can be this foil. He can be this interesting character opposite the Master Chief. It's not the Arbiter. We could have had the Arbiter being opposite Master Chief the entire time, but fans already killed that, so okay. We have the Didact. We have a guy who literally is just beyond Master Chief and any other human's comprehension of how much power he has. He literally can lift Master Chief up and throw him away like the guy from Force Unleashed without so much as a blink of an eye. That was fantastic. It immediately took away from the whole, you're a super soldier who can do anything, and then, yeah, they give the USB, you are now the only one who can save the universe. I mean, I get it because of the whole composer bit, and that being a way to make sure that fans wouldn't complain, well, why didn't he get turned digitized? But still, just... I liked the idea of the Didact.
The idea, yeah, but then the execution was really, he's boring.
Even really just boring. The way that they introduced all of the villains in Halo 4 felt mildly slapdash. It's like, you got there's such a sense of victory at the end of 3, and it's like, you know, all the elites are now independent and they're trying to open people's eyes, and you're reading all of the extended universe stuff about the various Covenant civil wars and blah, blah, blah. And then you crash in Halo 4 and it's like, oh yeah, all the Covenant are your enemies again. Because reasons.
Well, I don't think it's
okay. We might fill them out a little.
Apparently, it's not all the Covenant. It's just there's some other elite. I forget. It's something like Amadal or something. It's something that involves an U and lots of M's and A's. But
it is a subsection.
But say, how do you know that, Elijah?
Because the Arbiter is going to be working with Agent Locke in Halo 5, so it'd be pretty.
Yeah, but how do you know that specifically like that? That set.
Because one of the cutscenes that actually hints to what's going on in Halo 5 happens in the Master Chief Collection. When you start...
So see, it's kind of like a hidden thing? It's not like...
No, it's not hidden. No, they show this. Halo 2 is bookended by cutscenes that involve the Arbiter and Agent Locke talking about the events of Halo 2, actually.
But long story short, there were certain things that they were missing out on by throwing the entire kitchen sink of, the Covenant collection at you. I mean, I had heard something about the, sorry, I'm blanking on the name right now. The big tanks in the blue armor.
Not Banshees, or are they Banshees?
Actually? The Wraiths?
Wraiths!
No, the two pair, the actual critters, the Huragok?
Oh, the Hunters?
Yeah, the Hunters. I'm trying to remember their formal name. About how they were essentially getting, turned away from the Covenant, and how, they're giant, since they're giant colonies of worms, they were, built on coexistence and stuff. And you were getting the entire array at them, and you weren't actually experiencing any of the Covenant that were still on your side. I mean, imagine how much more interesting it would have been if a group of elites showed up that were trying to hunt down some of these zealots, and you got to work with them for a mission. How much more interesting would that have been?
That would have been fun, yes. Fully agreed.
And you can command them like Rainbow Six or something.
Well,
Squad,
my thing is
suppress.
Also, really, if we're talking full on what would have been awesome for Halo 4, I wish they had actually brought the Arbiter back, because here's the thing. They actually have recently hinted that the UNSC is once again fighting wildcat colonies, because that's what it started right before the Halo Wars began. It was a simple matter of fact that the UNSC was trying to contain innies, and now apparently they're fighting them somewhat again. That's part of the setup for Halo Nightfall. So what if we actually played as Arbiter and he was fighting alongside the UNSC and everything, but we also saw a bit more moral ambiguity because they're also fighting innies in addition to the Covenant Remnant. Hell, the Covenant Remnant could even be potentially working with the innies.
Wouldn't that be something?
There you go. Spartanoff Season 2. Make it happen.
Oh yeah, and by the way, I screwed it up. The hunters were apparently, well, how do you pronounce that? Galacolo? I think the Hergox were the flying ones, the engineers.
See, I'm drawing a blank. It's been so long since I played Halo.
Oh yeah, I was right. The Hergox are the engineers.
Let me see. Magal Ekgolo, and their scientific Halo name is Ophis Congratio.
I just know Ugoni and
a unique gestal of smaller creatures known as Lekgolo. Yeah.
We're going to make like an entire outtake section of all of us trying to like go through and pronounce the formal names of all the aliens from Halo.
Outtake? That'll be part of the content.
Actually, yeah. I feel I should say this now because people probably have noticed it in the past few podcasts. I actually usually take either from pre-recording the actual episode to something funny that we might have to cut out. I actually include a brief bit where something very odd happens before we actually hit the intro.
Now, something that you've mentioned is how the franchise has become beholden to Master Chief, and pretty much that was kind of their downfall in a lot of ways, because when they did try to do something different, fans were like, no, you can't do that.
And it narrows the scope of what they can do.
Right. Whereas, with Mass Effect, they kind of get around that by giving you interesting things to do, interesting parties. But if you're talking specifically a single foil, I love Zelda and I love Metroid. And yes, in every Zelda game, you pretty much do the same damn things. But the thing is, and every time, the world is almost always different. There's always unique, interesting visual styles. There's enemies. So you may be doing the same thing, but you're doing it in different ways in some cases. Whereas in Halo, you're always just killing aliens, and Master Chief is just boring. At least Link, they make you where you can actually project onto him, whereas Master Chief is really unrelatable in pretty much every way. He is to me like a 10-year-old boy who's awkward around girls, and he has like that one crush, and now he's a adult. That's because he's just got super strength and stuff. He's just not relatable in a lot of ways, and he's not very interesting.
Part of my problem is that he could be so much more relatable, and one of the things that I always regretted about the Halo series is they throw down all of this really interesting lore, and then they don't seem to do anything with it. I mean,
the interesting stuff happens outside the games, and that's the shame.
If you really wanted to go into some, messed upness of, the love life of the Master Chief, how messed up is it that he's essentially crushing on an AI with no physical form that was made from the illegally cloned brain of the closest thing he has to a mother figure?
Hideo Kojima now immediately wants to make a Halo game.
Oh, God.
No, Kojima would do something much more bizarre and have a dog companion.
Yeah, well, they actually already have that enemy type in Halo 4. They do have that enemy type, so you wouldn't even have to work that hard.
But the problem is with Halo is pretty much all the interesting stuff in most of the games doesn't happen inside the games universe. Not always. There are some exceptions. There's cool and interesting things in there sometimes, but a lot of the really interesting things happen in the extended universe. And that's a shame. And I understand, that fans want more and they're trying to sell this universe. But in Mass Effect, there's always interesting stuff going on in the games for the most part. Yeah,
I need to pop your bubble here on Mass Effect. I really do. Because you keep citing it as this big example of how it doesn't have a problem. But it actually is a big problem for me, because they keep talking about Mass Effect 4, and I'm not
talking about Mass Effect 4, though.
But here's the problem. We're talking about Master Chief and the series as a whole for Halo, and I'm talking about the series as a whole for Mass Effect here, and I'm actually not that excited for Mass Effect 4. I've had a pretty conclusive ending, and I kind of wonder if some people actually had that with Halo 3. I'm sure most people didn't, but I'm not actually that excited for Mass Effect 4, because Shepard's story concluded, and that pretty much was all I needed of the Mass Effect universe. So I'm kind of, I'm not sure if that's an example of how to break the sort of thing where you have just this one character and you can just keep changing things up, because if they had kept doing Shepard, it would have gotten old. But if they do something else, then they're going to be facing a lot of the same problems Reach did. It's a catch-22.
But I was referring only to the first 3 games, because obviously 4 coming out, 4, I don't even know, because like you said, you have your trilogy with Shepard, and that's it, and I felt closure. There's a definite sense of closure in some ways. And the same thing with Halo 3. A lot of fans were kind of, I know a lot of people were miffed that Halo was coming back. A lot of people were excited, but then it was like, well, why couldn't we just leave it alone? And, hey, it's a giant cash cow, we can't do that. But Mass Effect, I don't know, it's... On one hand, the universe I found, it's really interesting, so on one hand, I wouldn't mind going back, but not in the way of a direct sequel in any shape or form or with Shepard. I would much rather play as Tali or Legion or any of the other side characters that were extremely interesting. Thane, all these other people, and I know
or,
a lot of them died.
a different genre at least. You could do a different genre, because you're talking about these ones. Garrus. Having a game around Garrus, you'd have stealth action. It'd be almost like a mix of Batman Arkham Asylum and Hitman.
It's also worth noting that part of the advantage Mass Effect has is that players having much more of an ability to essentially create whatever they want in their player character tend to get more attached to the supporting cast.
Yeah.
Whereas in Halo, you can see an awful lot of people getting attached to the Master Chief. So mixing things up with the Mass Effect series, they'll probably be all right. Because if you look at, the particular BioWare fan base from game to game to game, people are obsessed with the supporting cast.
Because they're fleshed out. Because Dragon Age Origins, the main character was the blank slate of old school RPGs, and the supporting cast was really, they were a couple of duds, but for the most part, the supporting cast was really interesting and entertaining.
Dragon Age 2.
My particular favorite was the Golem. She was awesome.
Oh, Shale.
And the pigeons. Pigeons!
But like even, going back to Neverwinter Nights, Baldur's Gate, even the old BioWare games, going forward into KOTOR, people love their party members. Right. So if they manage to create an interesting set of party members, they'll be fine. It doesn't matter. They'll be fine.
Which, given BioWare's, that's pretty much what they do.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you know what? This brings to mind one last thought I want to have on this before we go forward. Spartan Ops. That's the one thing that could actually potentially change things.
Spartan Ops.
Wow. But Forward Onto Dawn kind of established, finally, we're going to make content outside the media. Yes, Master Chief Playable freaking shows up as well. But they actually tried to establish some different characters. They tried to establish Lasky as his own thing. And then for Spartan Ops, they flat out drop Master Chief. He's not involved. Even though the events of the comic book focusing on Master Chief and the few other Spartans he's friends with, yes, the Spartan Super Friends.
The Halls of Justice.
But,
the Halls of Mountain Dew and Doritos, I should say.
Well, Spartan Ops kind of fails at making the characters you're playing as be present. Literally, I think the most screen time you get is the Pelican you're riding in at the end, at the very climax. It's, visible.
Spartan Ops was pretty much geared toward the characters that they were trying to flesh out was essentially the rival team. They were the ones that typically had, the punchlines, the being fully voiced, that were being constantly ribbed by Palmer, etc., etc. Being more of a fan of cooperative gameplay, I really, really wanted to love Spartan Ops. I really did. I couldn't stand it because I couldn't get through a single game without lag. I could not play with anyone. I have a pretty darn fast internet connection, and it was just not optimized well enough. That was the number one complaint I heard about Spartan Ops was lag. it wasn't even running as well as Reach Firefight.
Yeesh.
And yeah, it was kind of. There's
And
potential
frankly, it's
there, and it was just.
It's useless if you can't play it.
Yeah, it's useless if you can't play it, and that's that. See, I did not know that many people were actually having that issue.
Well, some of us have been playing these for some time, so.
Yes, some of us are still catching up. In fact, I need to be putting Halo 4 in tonight. Yes, I can tell the excitement. And going from Halo 4, I'm riding on my Segway. I'm going away from zombies. They're all on fire. Halo 4, one of its lead writers, is going to be contributing to Mass Effect 4. I'm curious, and Theora, you are livid, terrified, ready to shoot someone?
Exasperated. I mean, it could be that it was, more on the director or whatever. There's a lot of people involved in making a game, but like I said, there was a lot of interesting ideas in Halo 4 that I felt like just got assembled way too harebrained and were not presented well. And I shudder to think of that going into Mass Effect, especially given the fact that part of the reason I'm not looking forward to the next Mass Effect game is quite simply that the whole ME3 ending controversy pretty much ends up showing that they're practically held hostage by the fan base at this point.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I had issues with the ending, but I had completely different issues than most people, it seems.
Which are what?
Long story short, I felt like the ending was rushed and lazy.
Yep.
The ending of Mass Effect 3 to me felt like a badly edited cutscene that needed more time.
Yeah, I pretty much felt the same. It was kind of like, wait, that's it? Weren't there like a bunch of arcs that you needed to resolve?
And even the extended cut didn't do that much. It just made a couple points. I hated
the extended cut.
Yeah, it's so shitty.
Part of my problem is that the extended cut ended up changing things that I felt were absolutely necessary. I mean, one of the things that really got me is so many people complaining loudly that they felt like the Mass Effect series couldn't be Mass Effect without the mass relays, whereas they had been hinting from Mass Effect 1 onward that the relays were what was stunting people. That was what was stunting technological development, that it didn't need to be that way, and that essentially the relays were what were locking people down. The Reapers had control of the relays. Keeping them from getting control of them again was part of a big storyline for the player.
I never heard this before.
I knew from Mass Effect 1 onward that the relays were going to have to be destroyed, and they were going to have to figure out that faster-than-light travel in some other format. And I liked the idea of that. It would have opened up space exploration so much more. And then what do we get? We get this extended cut ending where, Reapers are our friends and they're putting the relays back together. Fuck that noise.
Okay, here's the one problem, though. I'd be fully okay with that as well, but they shot themselves in the foot, and I do not buy for a freaking second that this just happened to be forgotten, because the Alpha Relay DLC for Mass Effect 2, you do not explicitly make a mission that its entire plot is around the fact that you have to destroy this relay and it will wipe out an entire star system pretty much.
Yeah, but you're destroying a relay by essentially sending an asteroid into it. That's a little bit different than having them all implode on each other.
But it doesn't say if they're imploding or not, and I know that we're getting into specifics here, but really, that was the issue, was you're basically making everyone think, okay, if the relays explode, we're fucked. If that's not what they wanted to convey, they shouldn't have done that. They should have had some other plot device, or it just shouldn't have been the issue. There should have been some other issue coming up, which would have worked better anyway, because the whole plot conceit just didn't work.
Maybe it's just because I work in a laboratory, but I am full well understanding of the fact that stuff explodes in different ways.
Yeah.
You
Well,
can
that's
blow up
fair.
the same thing in very different ways, some of which are very contained. That
And some of
said,
which are not, and very awesome.
yes. That said, I really felt like, again, we're looking at a case of the direction that the Mass Effect series can go is getting stunted.
Yeah.
But see, I would. One of my biggest issues with the ending, disregarding everything in the ending that's messed up, before Mass Effect came out, BioWare came out and said all of your choices are going to have an effect on the ending, and then also they said it's not going to be a simple A, B, C or ABC choice. There's going to be multiple endings, and then it was the exact opposite of that. So that alone, just the fact that BioWare is promising one thing and showing something the exact opposite of what they said, that was, I know, a lot of things that a lot of people I talked to, they said, well, even if you ignore the fact that the ending is in a lot of ways not that great, if they hadn't have said all that stuff, I wouldn't be as pissed. But since they said all this stuff and then they gave me the exact opposite of what they said, it rubs salt in the wound.
Well, here's the thing.
That's very much a case of the hype train, though.
Here's the thing.
But the thing is that it's not saying the hype train, they could just said, hey, the endings, don't say anything. They'll just, bam, don't say anything,
Okay.
God forbid.
Here's the thing, though. Here's what I actually, because they were promising this, and realistically, everyone who, understands game development knows you can't really have every decision impact it. You can't really have everything matter.
Obviously, so they
Here's
shouldn't
what-
have promised it
here,
in the first place.
hey,
Hey,
walk
hey,
with me here. Walk
No.
with me here.
I run, I don't walk.
I expected Mass Effect 3 to actually be a fairly short playthrough. Here's why. Because I think it would have gone over a lot better if they'd made a bunch of shorter branching campaigns. I know that everyone's going to think I'm crazy for saying this, but the one thing I found out recently is there is one game out there that actually pretty much delivered on the whole promise of the whole your choices will matter and change the various different endings. Shadow the Hedgehog. I know, but that
Yep.
one apparently has like 200 endings. Seriously, it's got like 200. Most of them are just slight variations, but
And also, anyone that plays through that game and gets to all those endings, you
Yeah,
deserve
you
some sort of
help.
medal and all the cookies in the world.
But the thing is, as a result, it was a fairly short playthrough. But if you'd done that with Mass Effect 3, if it would have been like, here's your personal story in the ending climax, while a lot of people would have, been like, oh, they cut out content for the multiplayer or something like that, at the very least, they could have made the choices have a greater impact because you have to produce less content for every choice. The less content you have to produce for every single choice, the more choices you can have because the more resources you can devote. That would have worked a lot better, in my opinion, than what happened. Maybe in that one playthrough, Cerberus works with you, whereas in this one they don't. Plus, that sends the replay value for those who actually like replaying RPGs to see all the choices through the roof. They'll be playing through all three of those games over and over and over. It would have worked so well, yet they didn't do that. Instead, they try to make it just all work within one path, even if it completely contradicted some of your choices.
And another thing is, what did y'all think at the end? You're there and you're making your decision. You can destroy the Reapers, control them, or synthesis. Okay. If you were to take control of the Reapers, it was blue, right? Paragon.
Yep.
If you destroyed the Reapers, red, Renegade. And then if you synthesized, it was green, right? Did any of you hear that theory where a fan theory that Shepard is actually indoctrinated at that point, and that's all in his head fighting the Reapers?
Yep.
What do you think? I know if BioWare basically came out and said crapped on it, it's like, that makes more sense than your ending does. Because if you watch their ending at the end, Shepard's surrounded by concrete and takes a deep breath, so he's not dead. And it's like, that fan ending is actually really thought out and has a lot of evidence, whereas yours, it doesn't make much sense in some ways and contradicts itself. What did y'all think about that?
Pretty much the same here. I mean, it was a neat effort, but it kind of felt like you guys are really reaching to try to make something out of nothing.
I gotta say that the one thing that came out of the extended cut ending that I actually liked was the addition of the refusal ending.
Yes.
That one made so much more sense to me. The idea that you essentially are contributing, you don't. I like the idea that I don't feel that I'm arrogant enough to make that big a decision that's going to, change entire species. And the idea that I can essentially leave something behind to help someone else do something right down the line.
But gamers want to stroke their massive ego. I wouldn't have minded. I wouldn't have minded if. No.
I would have liked if the only thing, and I really honestly, the one aspect that made me feel a little bit like it was a slight bit of fuck you, because a lot of people wrote refusal endings of their own. I know that a ton of those. I remember just I heard about one that was good on DeviantArt, and I tried to look it up, and it's like, holy shit. But I would have liked if you had enough resources, you could potentially still at least waylaid the Reapers, but you send civilization back a bit. You could have been, a Battlestar Galactica sort of thing where it's like, well, we're kind of screwed and no one's pretty much going to know what's going on out here, but we won, I guess.
Or did we?
That's actually part of the reason why I was initially looking forward to Mass Effect 4 before the extended cut ending, because I kind of liked the idea of you essentially being like generations in the future with all of these alien species stuck at Earth, mining what they could out of our solar system, having a constant back and forth for resources, trying to, create these technologies that would further civilization, but at the same time just trying to support all of these people.
Yeah,
Can you imagine the, racial tensions that they could have had between humanity and aliens, and the fact that, the Earth was already overpopulated.
Yep. Plus, they'd also have to be dealing with all the threats of whatever leftovers were left by the Reapers. Even if they beat them...
Or the people that were devoted to the Reapers and that kind of stuff.
Exactly, the indoctrinated... Oh my gosh, the indoctrinated could actually be a cult-type thing that you would have had to deal with, too.
An actual interesting cult that makes sense, whereas over Unitology, because Unitology is the stupidest cult ever. That makes no sense.
Read Dead Space Martyr, it makes a small more...
I should not have to read a book in order to make sense of it.
It's a good book!
I don't...
Or at least it's enjoyable. It's a good read.
But see, something about Mass Effect, I think something that would be interesting is if you, from Mass Effect, or just some sort of series of games where you are trying to prolong, they did it really starting with 2 and 3, where you're trying to prepare for this massive, world-changing, apocalyptic, world-ending, galaxy-destroying evil coming, and to have it all... I know players wouldn't like it if it ended up for naught, but if you think about it, if you have these things that have been around as long as the Reapers have, and they're obviously way more powerful in pretty much every way, except for the one that got killed by a Thresher ball. I mean, what? To have it end, kind of like Reach, where you're fighting, but at the end it's like, well, you did your best, but that's it. To end on that note where the good guys don't always win. Sometimes there's things we can't control, and I know some people don't like that because they like escapism in game. But I think that would be more interesting if they kind of gone. They went too many. They try to have too many choices, and if they devoted to certain aspects early, like this is what they were going for.
Yeah, like if they
it'd be interesting.
Biosynthesis, that one is just
space magic.
Deal with that. It just
space magic.
So
bad.
The lizard came from the moon.
Alright, enough Mass Effect. Let's talk about something else now.
Let's talk about something that I already revealed about once on this podcast. Evolve. Now, I have to be clear.
Wake us up when you're done.
That's all you got.
Well, let's put it this way. Evolve in concept is very much the Aliens sort of vibe to it. I mean, it's got everything. It's got Danzig's mother playing in the trailer and all that. It's got this very retro aesthetic to 80s sci-fi. It's not 70s, it's very 80s with a bit of
Danzig's mother makes it sci-fi?
No, but it fits the way that the guitar sounds, the effects they add to the cover of it, makes it feel very much like a song from that era.
Uh-huh.
But basically, it's 4 hunters versus 1 monster, in case you missed my earlier thing, and I'm happy to report one thing. My frustrations about the progression system were actually misplaced. It turns out that instead of giving you objectively better weapons and such for upgrading, it just gives you different perks. So like, oh, you unlocked the perk to have plus 5% damage. Whereas it's like, well, it's great that it's at least a choice, but a percentage still freaking sucks in terms of upgrades unless it does a dramatic amount of stuff. Even from just a purely psychological standpoint, 5% doesn't sound like much. It's not really encouraging, whereas plus 200% jump height, that sounds like something significant. So people are more likely to pick that one. But I got to play the alpha for a fair amount, and I will say this. Playing as the hunters was pretty awesome because there was one case, and I also talk about this in my preview, where we were doing horribly. I mean, horribly. We kept trying to trap the monster, but we couldn't get it in time, and I was the trapper. So I'm running in front, trying to keep track of this guy, and cannot trap him to save my life, and he gets to stage 3. And this is after he was already trolling us in the chat, tapping things, and saying random gibberish snarkily at us. And then, when he reaches stage 3, there's always some nearby secondary objective he can do other than taking out the hunters. That's a victory. But here's the thing. He wasn't anywhere near it, so we ran for it. And I just, I dropped the shield, because there's this dome shield that's supposed to trap the monster. It also keeps him out. And this is one of the better aspects of Evolve, is that a lot of things have hidden additional means of use within the limited context of every hunter having only a certain set of weapons that you can't ever swap or change or anything. So I dropped the shield, and we actually heard him pounding on it, trying to get in. But in the meanwhile, our assault guy is dropping proximity mines, our medic's getting up on high so that she can heal and snipe as need be, and our support's just cowering in a corner ready to drop a shield whenever on anybody whoever needs it. And I'm sitting there smack dab in the center, SMG ready, my NPC companion, because Maggie gets an NPC companion dog bear type thing. It's a weird
Daisy.
Yeah, Daisy. She's very interesting little pet. And I just, it was like, come on, you, and I'm breaking the swear jargon, you son of a bitch, let's do this. Because we were all ready to kick this guy's ass. He made a mockery of us for so long. And we did it. We all worked together cooperatively. It was like the type of cooperation you see from the best matches of Left 4 Dead or something like that, but it was all happening organically. And I was the only person using a microphone. No one else was. But even though I got knocked out once, I was the only person who got knocked out. This guy was stage 3. He didn't even touch the secondary objective, even though we eventually let him into the room near it. He never got a scratch on it. We kept him busy for so long. The medic kept me alive for halfway through the battle, and when I dropped down, I even got to deliver the last few shots into his face as he was being taken down. That is Evolve at its best. Evolve at its worst is when the roles are reversed and you're playing as the monster. Now, you both know I play a crap ton of multiplayer games. Evolve is the only game to make me so stressed out that my arms and body were physically shaking because of how stressful it is to play as the monster. I mean, like, seriously, they give you no breaks, no chance to even get a handle on what you're doing. It's pretty much like, okay, the hunters are coming right for where you spawned. Wait, what? You're not even, spawning me a certain distance. Wait, no, you gotta start running. Oh, and by the way, they can follow your tracks no matter where you go, unless you use stealth, which does nothing, really, because you move so slowly that even the medic can start to chip away your armor from a distance. In the meanwhile, you need to kill non-player character creatures that can attack you back and take away some of your health just as much as the hunters. And you're also supposed to be doing all this while continually moving and also eating their bodies. And then eventually find a safe place to evolve to your next stage, select your new abilities real quick, and then, God willing, you get to stage 3, which you probably won't if you're just a starting player. Maybe you'll earn a slight amount of experience that you might slowly move away from the horrible to control Goliath. I mean, it's not that the controls themselves are bad, it's just he's so weak. He looks so massive, but he's horribly, horribly weak. I mean, it's like a Krogan with the stamina of a Solarian.
For the record, I've been checking Facebook through this rant.
It's perfectly fine. But just, my problems with Evolve are not what I actually was expecting to have as much. I mean, some still exist. The progression system is still extremely grindy and unpleasant, even if it's not as bad as I thought it was. And the criteria for some things are insane. Like, you have to have over, I think it's over 200,000 barrage points the damage points have to be made on a monster before you get this 1 star for the support guy. It's like, you wouldn't get that in 20 hours. And this is the starting character. And this is the first thing you have to unlock. It just... I'm going to say it. I actually don't plan on trying to even, actively look into Evolve beyond this point. If you're still excited for it, okay, good for you, but they've still presented nothing to suggest that it's actually worth playing. It's kind of like, well, if this was $15, it might be worth it. Not $60 with a $30 season pass.
That's $30? I thought it was $25 or something.
$25, $30, it's pretty much either one of those. Alright, now Theora, you might want to shut down Facebook. It's your turn.
Well, I was actually going to say, I actually watched some people playing the alpha for Evolve, and even just watching it, it just was like, really, the art direction, it was really hard to see what was going on in some cases.
Oh yeah, every level is the same.
It's just, even though they weren't working together and coordinating, when they kind of did, it just looked bland. It was like, this doesn't look interesting. The monster, like you said, he's constantly harassed. And never once did he feel or look like an imposing monster. Even when he hit stage 3, it was like, yar, it's not like, holy shit, it's Godzilla's more, it's Mothra?
Plus, every hunter doesn't have to unlock anything. They get all their abilities right away. So, while the monster is incredibly weak at stage 1, hunters, they have everything.
They're OP.
Yeah, it's like starting a MOBA match, but where one player just has a huge health bar, and the opposing team, while they're missing one player, they're all maxed out. They have all their items. They've progressed to the maximum, and they're just going to go kill him.
Admittedly, a lot of this just kind of sounds like a balance issue that could get worked out.
It could get worked out, but the fact of the matter is, this was an alpha released without NDA, and they pretty much were throwing out codes like candy. If anything, I'd say Turtle Rock and 2K are so confident in this thing that even if almost every critic was voicing the opinion similar to mine, they'd probably still be like, who cares? It'll still go over well. And they've been winning so many damn awards regardless. And a lot of the time it's like, oh, we played one match. You don't give an award out for a single match!
You really also just stop. Can we stop giving out awards to games pre-release?
Yes!
That's just stupid and defeats the purpose, and you just add to a massive hype train.
Yeah, and it just misleads people when they see
cough Titanfall, cough Destiny, cough Watch Dogs, Assassin's Creed. Need I go on?
Yeah.
I have fallen off of so many franchises over the years. Shoot me, I'm turning into a gaming hipster.
I kind of feel the same way because my friend, he's going on about the games he's pre-ordered. I'm like, dude, did you hear about this game? What? You haven't heard about this game? Put it up on Steam. What? Huh? It's like, wow, really? I could buy 10 copies of this for that copy of Shadow Mordor you have sitting there. I mean, come on. So, he has ranted enough.
I think we're good on Evolve.
I think so too.
Alright, Theora, let's have you talk a bit about Resident Evil Revelations, and then we should wrap up.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not exactly the best authority on this, but I have to admit, I'm not sure if anyone's been keeping track of, Game Informer's cover stories, but Resident Evil Revelations 2 actually made me, sit up and notice the Resident Evil series after a very, very long time.
Which was the last entry you played?
I haven't played them before.
Oh, okay then.
I will admit that there's probably a bit of shameless pandering to my cosplay hobby in there because I look an awful lot like Claire Redfield, and that cover from Game Informer was absolutely awesome. But I mean, some of the things that we've been seeing from them, like the fact that they're trying to actually get back to survival horror roots, actually putting, horror above the set pieces and not needing to shock people as much with some of these, smaller episodic offshoot games, could really, really draw me back in. Because I got to admit, I mean, I love the Dead Space games, and I love the fact that the first game had a lot of jump scares in it, and the second game they realized you've kind of gotten immune to it, and they went into a much more psychological horror route. As soon as it went heavy action in 3, I just started dropping off. It didn't feel quite as balanced. And, Revelations... Oh, sorry, something started playing.
Also, the episodic route, that holds some very interesting promise, too.
It could, or it could just be kind of annoying, because you can buy it. It's going to be released weekly, so I just keep thinking in my head,
Sorry about that, I just missed, the last couple of minutes between you guys when I dropped off, because some random audio just launched at me in a window.
Weird.
Bizarre. That said, I mean, what I was saying before I suddenly got cut off was that Revelations 2, it seems like, the developers are actually taking a little bit more of a stab at something we've all been complaining about recently, about, inclusion in games and portrayal of female characters, and how I've done my research. So a lot of people weren't exactly pleased about, how Jill Valentine got treated. Everybody loved the badass cop from the first Resident Evil game, suddenly by the 5th being some, mind-controlled thing with a stuff planted in her boobs. That's really the only way to describe it. I'm sorry.
But, so the thing is, though, on a whole, Resident Evil has treated their female characters better than a lot of other franchises. Even though the whole Jill mind control thing is pretty embarrassing, as a whole, they've actually treated them, especially the earlier titles, they've been treating them as actual people. They didn't make a big deal. It was like, all right, here's your character. You're a girl. Yeah, so what? Get over it. Play the damn game. They didn't make a big deal. They didn't do anything. And, yeah, which was
and they
a
seem
shame
to be
when
getting
they did it
back to that.
Right. And that's something that's really cool.
Yeah, even in Resident Evil 6, they has an element of that, because when you go in the 1 campaign, one of the main characters is actually female, and there's also the whole Ada Wong side campaign, and in both cases, the women are just about as protective as every other male character in the game.
Well, Ada Wong is pretty much a badass who makes the males...
Except for Leon campaign's character, Helena, she just... I don't... She was the bad female character that I can think of in the series. She's the one that just, it's like, nah.
Ada Wong?
Not Ada Wong, no, Helena from RE6.
I don't know. See, Ada Wong, she reminds me a lot of Bayonetta, where I know a lot of people, they say, oh, Bayonetta's over-sexualized, but the thing is, if you actually play the game and pay attention to her, it's like, she's one of those people, from my experience, or from my perspective, she looks like she knows what she's doing, and she knows she's messing with people. And Ada Wong, she's the same way. She knows she's messing with Leon, especially in Resident Evil 4. She shows up and she saves his ass a lot of times, and she just disappears. And she's always wearing that red dress that's cut up to her legs a little bit, where it's a little revealing, but not a lot. And it's always making him unsettling because Leon's very stiff, very professional, very, yeah. And then Ada Wong just shows up, kills her, and thinks, she's like, all right, I'm going to go. And he's like, wait, what just happened? What? And it threatens his masculinity. And I think that was something very interesting because it shows, just because a main character doesn't have to be dressed like Jill or Claire in the first ones, they were in cop uniforms to be interesting. They can be an interesting female character, and you don't have to over-sexualize them. They can still be, quote-unquote, sexy and appealing. And I know I'm thinking of a better way to phrase it, but, sexually, I don't know how to say it, but, they look attractive, I guess.
A woman can still be attractive with her clothes on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
But also, she doesn't have to be. They don't have to be always the male swap outs. Like, some of the Resident Evils, they've kind of swapped them out. And there's like, all right, the girl just is a guy now. Whereas Ada Wong and like Jill and Claire, they felt more like just characters who just happen to be female. They weren't like a swap out. They didn't just say, all right, well, she's a male character, but let's change it now so she's a girl. And
she
that's
wasn't
all it is.
she wasn't suffering from strong female character syndrome where they are strong
Yeah,
and nothing
they're-
else.
Yeah, that's
Alien isolation.
yeah.
Final Fantasy 13.
Oh yeah, that too. That's even worse.
I mean, Final Fantasy.
Hey, that's a part of my childhood.
How old are you? Gee, whiz.
25.
You're the oldest one here, and that's part of your childhood?
Well, the
That's-
Final Fantasy series, yes. You didn't
Okay,
say
I was about to
specifically
say-
13.
Well, 13, that's the one I was mocking right there.
Okay.
I've never actually...
Because the
played
other
one
Final
with
Fantasy
access.
games.
I've never had access to playing them, so I'm trying to get around to playing them now, so yeah.
Get on that.
So yeah, Resident Evil Revelations 2.
I
Not
kinda like-
hyped, but interesting.
I'm definitely interested, especially, seeing some of the gameplay footage where they've got, that really nice dynamic going on between Moira Burton and Claire Redfield, where you can actually see, like, I really think that that's one of the things that horror games suffer from a lot, is that when you drag the exact same character through multiple entries, they're kind of getting numb to all of the terrible things around them. So, I mean...
Isaac Clarke.
like Isaac Clarke.
It's like, oh look, cool, more dead bodies in Necromorphs, whatever, dude.
I already took out plenty of those before. How can I take them out better this time?
Oh, I'm
But-
killing a space god. Okay.
But, having that juxtaposition of, Claire being the calm, collected one, or trying to be,
Right.
actually having to, play the mentor role to Moira, who's just freaking out at that rate.
And like
it helps-
Resident Evil 4 did it with Ashley. You were Leon accompanying Ashley, the president's daughter. And I know a lot of people didn't like it, but I liked it because you were there to protect her. That was your thing. You rescued her. And there were parts where you got separated, and the way that she played was radically different than the way Leon played. And it made sense because she's not a badass trying to do this. She's a normal person thrown in this oh shit situation, and then you're like, well, what am I going to do now?
Exactly. Anyway,
Well, that would be kind of cool, like, if her aim, I know people would always complain, but it's like, her aim is not as good as Claire, so maybe she's more likely to get scared and her aim's not as good, just stuff like that.
from what we've seen, Moira actually isn't going to handle guns at all in Revelations 2. She's going to be going melee.
Yep.
But we are getting a notification that we are running out of time, because holy shit, we've been at it for a while.
Yes, we have. All right. Something I've actually wanted to try because members of our podcast, including the one speaking right now, have a habit of playing a number of games usually. So instead of the usual all the games we've been playing recently, we talk about one in particular that has been stand out to us. And for me, I'll go first real quick. Really, that's been Reach. I just beat Reach when in between times over the weekend, and well, I already spoke about it a fair amount earlier, but still, it's just kind of like, yeah, it's a good game. It's just not the greatest story, in my opinion. I just finally started to kick in the multiplayer because I got Xbox Live Gold today or yesterday. My time tracking skills have not been great this weekend, but I finally had to kick it in and try out the multiplayer, and I was enjoying it. It was a fair amount of fun. It was really good. I kind of was surprised by some of the changes, like the hunters. I remember being able to beat them so easily in Combat Evolved in 2. Whereas here it's like, crap, I have to either get up close and personal or I have to blow them away with 1,000 tons of ammo. And yet here, Plasma Pistol, boom, that thing kills everything now, and it used to be, just for breaching shields or if you had nothing else. So it's it's been interesting, and I look forward to, even though all the things that I am looking forward to finally popping in Halo 4, I'm looking forward to, at some point, acquiring 3 and ODST and beating those as well. Especially because, for those of you who don't know, on PC, we've been on a cliffhanger at Halo 2. I'd like to finish the darn fight.
Ha ha.
Alright. Get up.
Caleb.
Actually, Deja Bon Games recently ran a Kickstarter not long ago. They're the developers behind Reckless Disregard for Gravity, Drop That Beat Like It's an Ugly Baby, Drunken Robot Pornography, among some other more interesting indie games.
With lots of interesting titles.
Oh, yes. But they recently wrapped up a Kickstarter for their new game, Elegy of a Dead World. And they were nice enough to send me a preview code. And it's the best way to describe it. It's an interactive fiction stimulator is the best way I can describe it. Because the way it works, right now there's one world only that you can play in. And then there looks like there's 4 in total. You go on this world and you walk around and you're exploring a civilization that's been dead for God knows how long. And at any time you can stop and write something. And the way it works is you're walking along and you're seeing all this different imagery, and there's different places that you can find, and it's supposed to stimulate and you just write about it. And at the beginning you can pick different prompts if you want, like one of the themes was a dark couplets or something. So I ended up writing, when you first start one story, I'm actually going to go back, I have an idea for another one, is you land and there's like these giant mechanical arms in the distance. So I wrote a story about this guy seeing arms that were always beckoning him and drawing him to all these different places where bad things happened, and he's just going on. And it's interesting because at the end you can edit your story and you can go through and read other people's contributions, and you can rate some there's some really good ones. And it's just really interesting because I could see it being used. I work as a tutor to help people who don't like writing or who normally can't, to give them that little push to be, hey, here's a little nudge. Let's not write about Hamlet and the Oedipus complex because that's kind of creepy and weird because Freud thinks everything's about penises. And let's actually do something that's a bit more interesting and have some stimulation, let's have some interesting music, let's have some interesting scenery, and just write something. And here's a prompt for you too. And I could see it being used as an educational tool. And on this forums, they've actually got a pin post from the developer saying, hey, if you want to use this in the class, let us know. And I think it's really useful, not only as a game, but it could be for a teaching tool, but it also has a community that I'm looking forward to see how it turns out. Obviously the full game, but also the interactions between the community and the stories they'll contribute. And I'm looking forward to it. It's definitely interesting. It's definitely more interesting than anything coming out in the AAA world right now. And I know I sound like a hipster, but I'm sorry. This is more interesting than Assassin's Creed Unity and Evolve and whatever else you got coming out.
It definitely sounds like it. It seems more like they're tasking you to be an archaeologist.
And that's the thing. There's no limits. They just say, all right, here's the thing, and then do whatever you want. And it's just really, it's cool. I like the idea, and it's executed really well right now.
Fantastic. I guess that leaves me then, huh?
Yep. You're up to that last.
We don't let Gerard talk, so yeah, it's you.
So, a little bit of what I'm doing right now is because, the Revelations 2 story caught my eye, I've been trying to, find an in to the Resident Evil franchise, which, trust me, is not easy considering how long it's been going, how many there are, and how there is apparently some shovelware in there.
You can skip 5 and 6. You can just skip those completely.
I was also told to ignore anything on the Wii.
No, the Wii actually had the Chronicles was actually kind of interesting. It was a light gun shooter.
Huh.
I actually enjoyed some of the co-op action in 6. I understand why a lot of people didn't, and the Chris campaign sucked, but I'm going to tell you right now, there's some neat ideas gameplay-wise, even if the story is an unmitigated mess.
And then, alright, Resident Evil 5, that you have, you play as Chris Redfield, who looks like he's eating steroids every day, but also his companion is from Africa, where you just happen to go, and you unlock an outfit where it's a tribal outfit, and it's a leopard bikini. It's like, really?
Dear God.
It's like, really? guys, you already had people saying the game was racist with you killing people in Africa. You had to do that. I was like, that's just tasteless.
It really was.
Anyways.
Well, I'm not sure if you guys will criticize it or not, but the way in that I ended up picking was Resident Evil Code Veronica X.
Because apparently Thera hates herself.
Apparently.
The HD version on the 360?
Yes.
Okay. I haven't actually played it yet.
I have a Dreamcast, but I decided to just go for the 360 version for the heck of it because I like the controllers. And oh dear God, it's like trying to shoot zombies from atop a Segway. Which I think there might be a photo shoot in there somewhere, but yeah, old school controls.
You just gave someone a game idea.
Wow.
You're happy. Someone's going to make a game.
Yeah, it's going to be Infinite Runner on mobile. You ride down a Segway. Tap
Paul Blart, Zombie Slayer.
Oh,
I guess that just shows, you know, how young a gamer I am. Because, yeah, it feels... Here, yes, but I'm sure at least a few people have been playing longer and have probably been playing since, you know, the PS1 days, but almost all of my early gaming experience was like old school point-and-click adventure games, and my very first-person shooter, since I don't count a single round of Midi Maze at a convention, was actually Halo. The original Halo. So, I'm definitely interested with... I'd almost compare my experience with Code Veronica to this point to playing Dark Souls, because it's very much a case of every time I die and I reapproach an area, you know, I've learned so much more about it. I can get through it easier, faster, more efficiently. And, I mean, there are so many little things about their system that can just totally screw you over that make it a little bit more horrifying through the inventory management even. The idea that an area just repopulated. Do you go through it? Do you shoot your way through it? Do you run your way through it? Do you risk running out of ammo? Because the enemies are unlimited, but the ammo is finite. It's a tricky thing to try and balance. The only problem is that I can't quite relate it to Dark Souls because the controls are so much older and more jank. Otherwise, yep. Otherwise, when I get tired of that, I go play The Secret World.
Really? Interesting.
I can forgive a lot of The Secret World's flaws just because it entertains me so much. I love Ragnar Turnquist's writing.
Agreed. It is definitely entertaining as all hell, if nothing else.
Especially since I'm playing an Illuminati biznatch.
Oh, of course you are. I would say if you were trying to start with the Resident Evil, I would try to get a hold of the recently released Resident Evil 4 on the PC. I haven't played it. I actually played it way back on the GameCube. And also the Resident Evil 1 remake that's on the GameCube, is apparently they're re-releasing it again. That's also one of the better Resident Evil games too. I've only played a little bit, but I know like everyone considers that pretty much the pinnacle. That and Resident Evil 4 are pretty much the pinnacles of Resident Evil.
Yeah, I was probably going to try 4 next and then potentially Revelations, because I tried the demo for Revelations and I did enjoy it.
Don't do Revelations on PC. Don't do that. Trust me, I tried.
Oh, doesn't that work?
The port is horrible. Aiming is mentally handicapped. It's so badly done. I mean, literally, it's Uncharted 3 level of I'm aiming towards something, but my reticle always seems to be like 3 inches off. And it doesn't work well. You're better off just getting it on your 360. You really, really
are. I was planning on it.
The only problem with Resident Evil 4 is I blame Resident Evil 4 for giving us the glut of popularity that third-person shooters now are. Even though it's a great game, but it's responsible for the Gears of War and all this other stuff. However, it also gave us Spec Ops: The Line, so I forgive it for that. But still,
hey, Dead Space also.
Yeah, but after Dead Space 3, I'm kind of like, I'm like Theo. I'm like, yeah.
If they can actually go away from the letting people make whatever weapons they want, I imagine it would actually go back to where it was. It was really just one issue of Dead Space 3 that unraveled into everything else. Fix that and it would have been fine. So
Let's see,
I'm
Dead
not too worried
Space
about
2 also had its issues, though. Even though it is the best game, it had a lot of issues.
Boy, you are walking on thin ice.
I'm so scared. So, anyways.
4 words, though, that make Dead Space 2 the most horrifying one out of them. Needle in the eye.
Really? I laughed.
You're a terrible person.
I never said I wasn't.
Anyway.
I'm also a father. Go figure.
Thank you all
Wrap
for listening. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please be sure to leave comments below.
Poke the needle in Gerard's eye, please. He deserves it.
Thank you, Theora, for coming on board with us for this podcast.
Thank you for having me.
For all things artistic, please be sure to follow us on YouTube and check out our website, artstreamgames.com. Good night, everybody.
Hello.
Good night.
For those who don't know, what is LA Cops?
So, LA Cops is a bright, vibrant, top-down shooter where you play one of or a couple of 70s cops.
Got a very Hotline Miami style to it. Meets Miami Vice. What was the inspiration for that style? Was it something your team had wanted to do for a while, or is it something more recent you came up with?
So we did a game before LA Cops called The Button Affair, which had a very crisp, clean